There we go. So we started this meetup about maybe 2 months ago. We recognized that things were going to be getting pretty tough for junior developers to get a job, and we just wanted to be able to answer any questions that people have about starting to apply, getting a job, any career advancing questions that junior developers might have. So we have been, for the past couple of weeks, inviting special guests to come and give their perspective on answers to questions that people might have. It's obviously an Ask Me Anything, an AMA style. So we have at the very top of the chat, we've got that Slido, and here, since we're doing so many greetings, I'll go ahead and post it again. And that's a great place to ask questions, and then you can upvote. If some question that somebody else has asked looks really interesting and you'd like to make sure that we get to that question, make sure you upvote, because that'll bump it to the top and we won't run out of time for that. Did I miss anything, Sam? Okay. So I will go ahead and start with my intro. I'm Brady. I am a software engineer. I work at Nordstrom Trunk Club, and I got into technology. I went to a coding boot camp in 2017, Dev Boot Camp. I was trying to figure out for many years what I wanted to do with my life, and eventually kind of put together the dots. I love learning spoken languages. Oops, got some background noise. Cool, it's muted. Oh, maybe not. We have, sorry about that. I majored in Spanish and I minored in Italian, and then I moved to a German-speaking country, and I obviously really liked that pattern of learning the patterns of languages, and had not really considered going into computer science or anything. But luckily, when boot camps got popular, I had heard about them and eventually made the leap to try Dev Boot Camp out. And it has been so fun to be able to get to learn every day. 90% of the tickets that I work on probably are front end. So I like to see these really cool things that I'm making. And yeah, that's enough about me. Go on and take it over, Sam.
Yeah, I'm currently a front-end engineer at Lyft. I work mostly on internal tools at the company for the mapping organization. And I've been a software developer I've been doing it professionally for about 7 years now. I have a long path that I took to get here, but the short version is, because it's really long if I tell the long version. Some people saw the long version the other night. I see some of the rhythm school recent graduates. Congratulations, by the way. Yeah, I got a computer science degree a long time ago. Graduated during the dot-com bust, 2002. Look, the tail end of the dot-com bust. Gave up too easily when I was looking for a job. Probably gave up after about 6 months. Ended up working in the mortgage industry. That blew up in 2008, financial crisis. Joined the Peace Corps. Lived in West Africa for a few years. Came back. Went to Dev Boot Camp. That was a boot camp that spawned all the boot camps. So back then, that was like the only one. It was an amazing experience. And then I did a bunch of things, tried to start a startup, did contract work, worked at a tiny startup, worked at a bigger company that had like 10,000 employees, worked at another public company, and then now I'm at Lyft. So yeah, that's my story. Is Aline still here? She was having some audio problems. Hopefully we can get that resolved. Let me see. Let me try and ping her.
Oh, I see her.
You see her? Where? Oh, Aline, is your audio working? Oh, she's frozen. Oh no. I wonder if okay, we might not get her video then. Yeah. You want to give like a brief introduction about yourself? You've been in this game for a long time. Yeah, it's a little choppy though. Can other people hear? Hello?
Shit. You know what?
Okay, we can. Let's give Aline some time to figure that
Technical
out.
difficulties. Aren't computers great, everyone?
Yeah, this is our biggest group yet, so or it's pretty close. Our group with Cassidy Williams was pretty big too. So we're also testing out Jitsi to see how much people it can handle streaming. But it seems to be handling it okay, at least for most people's connections. But yeah. Does anybody have questions for me or Brady while we wait to try and fix Aline's audio?
If you have questions for us, you can feel free to unmute yourself or type them in the chat in this screen here.
Yeah, we want to save those questions in the Slido so Aline can. She has the most experience out of all of us, so we want to make sure we get her input inside of those questions. If people haven't looked at her LinkedIn, I can post it in the chat. She's been around for a while. Let me get the link.
I have a quick question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, my name is Rudy. I'm a new developer in San Diego here. Brady, I've been watching your YouTube videos and like your YouTube channel, which I found really fascinating. And I remember last week, I believe Jason was talking about like developing a personal brand as a developer. I was wondering how, maybe if you can comment a little bit on maybe developing a personal brand and what that might entail in terms of publicizing yourself or how to maybe brand yourself, so to speak, and if that is beneficial.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm still kind of in the beginning phase of all of that. I started trying to create some content. I feel like it's been maybe 2 months. It's very recent still. But I think it's always helpful to find some way to get in front of the eyes of other people. And there are so many ways to do that today. YouTube is one of them. A lot of people have been writing Medium articles. I mean, Cassidy Williams, if you guys have followed her, she has a ton of followers on Twitter. Anybody who is able to get in front of the eyes of other people, I guess, you're just you're showing your passion a little bit more. And I feel like people end up feeling like they know you a little bit. And I think that's always a good sign if you're in the market looking for a job. I happen to be, I am just so grateful for all of the people that helped me along the way get to where I am. And I, similar to Sam, just don't want anyone to give up. And so I'm trying to get out there and reach as many people and assure people that yeah, it's going to be hard to find a job, but demand is just going to increase after all of this is said and done. Like, hiring has paused for a little bit now, but demand is going to increase. And I know I had such crazy imposter syndrome. It stops me from getting started. And I think that's such a bummer, because it's the practice that people put in that helps them overcome the imposter syndrome, because they can start to see that, no, I can learn this, I can make things. So I don't want people to fall into the trap that I was pretty close to falling into, and like maybe giving up. So I could talk a lot more on that. I see it. It looks like Aline might be back. And if she's not, I wonder if Sam has anything else to say.
Yeah. Oh, I saw her bubble go green for a second. I think that's your connection, like how good it is. There's like a bubble that's like red, yellow, or green. But yeah, my advice is just, what was the question again? Building your brand? Well,
Yeah, a little bit about building your brand, maybe like, like
marketing yourself.
leveraging, social media to like, market yourself kind of,
Yeah. So the first step, I think, is just to put out a lot of content and just be yourself. In the beginning, you probably won't get much traction. I mean, you never know though. Sometimes something just goes viral. Like, I see Hales here. She's done some LinkedIn post that just exploded for some reason. There's like hundreds of people just like interacting with the content. So you never know. You just post what you're doing, any struggles, anything you're making, any questions. If you just put a lot of content out there, eventually I think you'll like develop a brand. It just happens. Like, I don't think you need to like plan it out. Just like pump out a lot of content. Just keep like posting on social media. So that's what I was.
One
What is
thing,
that?
I recently participated in a JavaScript hackathon. And what I made, I'm very proud of course, just with my skills as a new junior developer. But I feel like it's not like 100% polished, because it is a hackathon product. I'll let Aline go ahead. Yeah, but I was just saying, like,
Okay.
All right, that sounds much better.
Okay, yeah, I ended up
later.
getting. I'm so sorry. So I finally got on. Better late than never. It's on my phone. So sorry if it ends up being like this.
At least we can hear you. Yep.
Yeah.
How's it going?
Fucking Comcast. I think they're doing construction literally next to my house.
Oh,
and
no.
It's and they're doing stuff under the house, and it's been a bit on and off. So sorry it happened today. I tested it before, but better late than never. Hi guys, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you, Sam, for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Of course.
Maybe if you could just start with going through your, like, introducing yourself, and then maybe tell us a little bit about interviewing.io as well.
Of course. I was looking at some of the questions that folks have submitted. I'm really excited to get to those as well, but an intro is a good place to start. So my name's Aline. I did a lot of weird stuff in my life. The reason I'm here today is because most recently I started a company called Interviewing.io. Maybe, hopefully some of you have seen our videos or used the product, but going backwards, before that, I worked as a recruiter for a few years. So I ran a recruiting firm, and I also ran hiring at a couple companies. The one you probably have heard of is Udacity. And then going back before that, I was a software engineer for about 5 years. And toward the end of my 5-year stint as a software engineer, I was actually a team lead. And I started getting into hiring a little bit, and just kind of realized how awful hiring was. Of course, I already knew how awful it was when I was a candidate, having bombed many, many technical interviews and having sent out a lot of resumes. And back then, like in my day, things were a lot easier, I think, than they are now. And it was still a slog. So, when I started hiring people for my own team, I quickly got frustrated with how we seemed to be over-indexing on the wrong things and just really focused on resumes. When so many of the people that were working at the company where I was already actually didn't look very good on paper, but were among some of the best engineers I worked with in my career. So I started interviewing IO to make hiring better, both for people that are looking for jobs and the industry as a whole, right? My belief is that the best people should get the best jobs independently of who they are. And I really want resumes to go away. That's a nice way of putting it. There are other things I can say about what I want them to do. I think technical interviews should be fixed as well, but one thing at a time. So I'm excited to answer the questions you guys have, and if there's anything else that IO interviewing IO can do to be helpful, I'm at your disposal.
Awesome, thanks for that. And if you have the Slido open, usually we just go from top to bottom. Brady will manage archiving stuff once we're done with the question. You want to kick it off, Aline? You have the most experience, so, and then me and Brady can jump in if we have more to add.
So I'll just go in reverse. So I'll do the oldest questions first.
At the top, though, Slido lets you upvote them, so the most upvoted questions are at the top.
Oh, popular. Okay, then I'll start with popular. Great. Okay, so first question is cold emailing recruiters even before you apply in the careers page a bad idea? So I guess it depends on what you mean by bad idea. I would, it's not going to hurt you, but I also think it's a colossal waste of time. Because most people here are junior developers based on the name of the event, right? That probably under 2 years of experience. Is that fair?
Yep, I think so. Most people like just recently graduated. From boot camp, and some people a couple years experience.
Gotcha. Okay, so what I'm going to say now is going to be a little rough to hear, but I think understanding how recruiters are thinking about you will help you beat the odds. So even before COVID and everything else, and the economy, being in this weird place it is now, even before that, there was kind of a bias among recruiters against bootcamp grads, right? The reason is that it's not that hard to find junior talent relative to how hard it is to find senior talent. So the idea is, we have this endless supply of junior talent already coming to us, so we don't really have to be very nice to them. We don't have to care that much about their experience. And, historically, and this is not true of all boot camps, but historically, boot camp grad quality has been a bit all over the place. There are some boot camps that are much better than others. Some have better reputations, and you all probably know that even better than I do. But basically, recruiters have very limited time. They don't take junior roles as seriously as senior roles, and they have more supply for those junior roles than for senior roles. So that means that recruiters are not your friend, is the kind of simple way of putting it, I suppose. And they're not really invested in helping you because they probably have a bunch of other things they're doing that are more core to their job than finding junior talent. So if you if you message a recruiter on LinkedIn, or even if you just apply online, your odds of ever hearing anything back are not very good. I would say it's kind of like screaming into a black hole and kind of expecting something to happen. So I would kind of turn this question on its ear a little bit and say, you probably shouldn't cold email recruiters or apply on the careers page, because both of those are just going to make you feel bad. I think that a lot of people assume, even if rationally they know it's not true, that when a company rejects you after you apply, it's because they looked at your stuff and they made some kind of educated guess about your competence level. And that's actually not the case. In most cases, nobody ever looked at your stuff in the first place. And then there's just a mass rejection that got sent out. So what I would do, especially now, right, where hiring for junior devs is probably more and more skewed than it was before and not in your favor, is I would just reach out to engineers who work at that company on the teams where you want to work. And if you don't know what teams, maybe just find people that are, somebody asked earlier about building brand. There are a lot of folks that blog. There are a lot of folks that are working on building their own brand. So just find people at that company that have written stuff in the public sphere. Maybe they're active on Twitter. Maybe they're active on GitHub, and just reach out to them and just be like, hey, look, I'm really excited about what you're doing. I like this piece that you wrote. I'm interested in your company. And, you know, just be genuine and don't write like 5 paragraphs. and your odds, I think, of hearing back from one of those people is an order of magnitude higher, maybe even 2 orders of magnitude than hearing back from a recruiter. They might kick you to the recruiting team, but then at least you kind of got in.
So follow-up question to that. You see the same, I've always been telling people, I see a difference between like a third-party recruiter versus a recruiter that works within the company. Do you feel like that's the same story?
Mm-hmm. There's definitely a big difference. They have totally different incentives. I wish there were different terms for them because they're like such different roles. You should probably not be reaching out to third-party recruiters ever, because they are not interested in hearing from junior talent because they can't make money off you. Third-party recruiters, which means they are not employed by the company where you want to work, they're employed by an agency, make money almost entirely on commission. So I used to do this for a living. It's really, really good money, as an aside. You get something like 20 or 25% of the first year's salary of the people that you place. So if you do the math, you know, you place 4 or 5 people in a year, you're getting an engineer salary for sending some emails. But the reason you get paid a lot of money is because you are filling hard to find roles that the company can't fill on their own. At Interviewing.io, we actually tried to launch a university program specifically targeted at new grads, and we could not get a single company to pay us any money for those placements. So if you are if you're reaching out to third-party recruiters, it's probably a terrible use of your time. Now, in-house recruiters I assumed in the question that was being asked that it was about in-house recruiters. Those are people that are employed either on a contract basis or full-time for a given company. So they actually work there. And I would still say, don't reach out to those, because similarly, they're, especially in this climate where a bunch of recruiters just got laid off and the remaining ones are working more roles than they ever did before, I would hazard that like filling junior roles and especially engaging with junior candidates is very low on their list of priorities. Does that make sense? I'm not trying to sound like an asshole, but it's the cold, hard reality.
So when you say reach out to engineers,
mm-hmm.
But like what is that gonna do, right? Like, because they're not the people in charge of hiring. They might give you, I tried doing that, they might give you advice, but they're not part of the HR department.
Yeah, so it depends from company. So you're right, recruiters are the ones who are tasked with hiring, but you'd be surprised by how much power engineers have. If they refer you in, chances are you will at least get an interview. And if you're lucky enough and strategic enough to actually not reach out to any engineer, but to actually an engineering manager, they're actually the ones that are most incentivized to fill slots on their team. There's sort of not confidentially, but I'll just kind of give you guys a little bit of a behind the curtain. There's always a lot of tension between the recruiting org at a company and the eng org, because the engineering leaders always feel like recruiters are not doing their job. They're like, I need 10 roles filled. I needed them yesterday. I want butts in seats. What's the problem? And then recruiters feel like engineers are not giving them the right criteria, or they're not supporting them, or they're not doing enough interviews. So both sides kind of, in most organizations, there's sort of this frenemy relationship. But if you actually get in with, I wouldn't reach out to a junior engineer, right? Because they, especially if they just got there, they're not going to use their capital on like getting you in the door. But if you reach out to somebody senior, and odds are the people that are writing a lot and you know, have a brand are probably more senior, they have surprisingly high amounts of clout. And I still think it's not perfect. It won't always work. But even if they just give you advice, at least it starts a conversation. And if you come off as somebody who's earnest and serious and actually is interested in that company, odds are good that they'll help you along. Won't work all the time. It's not foolproof, but it's certainly better than applying online or reaching out to recruiters.
Yeah, I agree with everything Aline said. Also, if you reach out to engineers at the company, they might not be able to refer you right away, but if you just build a relationship with them, when something does come up, they might realize, oh, this person might be a good fit to like do this role. I'll refer them for this role. So it might not pay off immediately. A lot of networking is like that. Like you might not see any results from all the networking you're doing, but eventually, like if you're just patient, stuff just comes up.
Yeah, I mean, it's frustrating that you even have to do any of this, right? Like in an efficient, like liquid market, you could just press a button and just get an interview immediately for the job that you want, or even just go straight on site at the job that you want. That's what we're trying to build. So like, I get the frustration. It's super dumb that you have to like treat this like a sales job and have the sales funnel and do all this cold outreach. That's not how it should be. You're an engineer. You should be spending your time building great products instead of trying to hustle. But right now, until that's fixed, that's kind of the sad reality. I guess last thing I'll add is, I don't know if you guys have heard the expression, when you want money, ask for advice. And when you want advice, ask for money. It's the same with this. When you want a job, ask for advice. And the point of that is to not only learn, I mean, you should go into it earnestly trying to learn something, but I think it'll take the pressure off and it'll help you build a rapport with that person and show them that you know what you're doing and you're smart.
Awesome.
Yeah,
I
thank
think we
you.
can move on to the next question.
Of course. Next, let me, I'm juggling this on mobile, so just give me
Oh,
1 second and I'll go back to the, okay. Yeah, it's, all right, there we go. Okay, next question. Does applying to multiple positions at one company make you look like, and it's refreshing, make you look like you don't know what you want? For instance, full stack dev applying to a front and back end role. It can. I think that chances are the same people, depending on the size of the company. If it's a really big company, chances are the people looking at them are so different that people are not even going to know that you apply to multiple roles. A lot of the applicant tracking systems that larger companies use are really janky, and you might not be able to find who's applied to different roles. If it's a smaller company, then odds are the same person will see it. I don't think this matters as much as you think. I think that what does look, as long as it makes sense, like a full stack dev applying to a front end back end role can make sense, especially if you are true full stack, right? But if you are a full stack dev who's applying to a mobile role and a data end role and to a junior role and a senior role, that looks dumb. Don't do that. Assuming somebody sees it, they might not even ever see it because nobody looks at online applications in the first place, to the earlier question. But I think that a full stack dev applying to front end and back end is fine, especially because, and I hope some of the engineers here back me up on this. It's been a while since I've been one, but even today, like full stack can mean so many different things. Some companies, when they say full stack, really mean front end. When some companies say full stack, they really mean mostly back end, but some JavaScript. So there's a gamut, and I think that if you are applying, you can write something. You don't have to submit a big formal cover letter, but be like, look, this is the kind of stuff I'm interested in. I'm not sure what the right position is. I've applied to these, and here's why.
Yeah, I second that also because especially if people are junior devs, I don't see there's going to be that much of a difference between like how specialized can you really be at this point. So
totally. Okay, should we keep going? Keep rolling along?
Sure.
Okay. This is fun. Okay. What are ways to stick out when reaching out to recruiters on LinkedIn? You guys probably know what I'm going to say. Don't reach out to recruiters on LinkedIn. I would really focus on, this is important though. If you are contacting engineers, don't use LinkedIn because engineers, especially senior ones, hate LinkedIn as a rule because that's where all the recruiters spam them nonstop. So they actually don't spend very much time on there and they just might not see your message ever. especially if you're sending emails and spending like your money on emails, which is a terrible use of money. So just find their emails. It's not that hard. You can, most of the time it's first name at companyname.com or first initial last name at companyname.com. And that's good enough.
Have you ever
I would
used,
say,
sorry, go ahead, Sam.
I was just gonna say, I would say Twitter's a good place too.
Oh yeah,
But
yeah, for sure.
I'm kind of biased. I love Twitter.
I love Twitter. I've started loving Twitter. I never used to use it for personal use. And then, you know, when I started a company, I'm like, yeah, I guess I should do this. And now I'm a convert.
Yeah, that's actually how I got Cassidy Williams on this page too. I just made a dumb joke, JavaScript joke in one of her tweets.
Nice. Yeah, Twitter just like lowers the friction for connecting. I'm a fan.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if you've ever used some sort of website to find people's emails. I think that's what we were told to do when I was starting out trying to find a job. But I've also talked to people who are really like, they don't want to do that in respect of other people's privacy. I'm curious of your opinion.
I've never found a good website that has people's emails. I mean, I would just guess them. Up until recently, LinkedIn, and before that, there was a product called Reportive, had a browser extension where when you started it for Gmail, right? If you started writing an email to somebody based on the email you put into the to field, it would populate that person's publicly available info. So maybe their Twitter bio, their Twitter photo, maybe their LinkedIn photo, whatever, right? And then you could use that as a way to guess and check. Because if nothing came up, then chances are, you know, it's not that person's email. Unfortunately, LinkedIn shut that down. One of the few useful things they've built. But
that's what I was thinking of too. Darn.
Yeah, I know. There are some other ones, but like it's not that hard to guess people. I think it's really hard to guess people's personal emails, which, you know, when I was a recruiter, that was a lot of the job because you don't want to send recruiting messages to somebody's work. But guessing people's work emails is surprisingly easy. Again, most of the time, you can just like go on somebody else that works there, like maybe look at the founder's bio and see what format the founder's email is, and then just assume that the company follows that format. In terms of privacy, honestly, people don't care where you got their email as long as the email says something useful. Nobody's ever offended. If they're offended, they just won't answer and they'll forget about you, and it doesn't matter. No one's going to think, oh my God, that asshole emailed me that one time, and I'll recite their name before bed every night. Like in Game of Thrones. That doesn't really happen. Actually, another thing in cold emails, this has helped me both when I was doing recruiting and later when I was doing sales and other things. Nobody cares where you got their email. So starting the email with, hey, I found your email on GitHub, or hey, I found your blah, blah, blah. Like that's a waste of a sentence, and people have very short attention spans. I don't care where you found me. Just say something interesting and capture my imagination in the first few sentences.
Yeah. We got a follow-up question in the Jitsi chat.
Sure, what is it? I'm just looking at the Slido thing, so please read me whatever.
It says, I know we have a list of questions, but I have to ask. All job search coaches and professionals that I've talked to before seem to talk about LinkedIn. If we don't use LinkedIn as the center of your search, what kind of workflow would you recommend? What does this sales funnel actually look like?
That's a good question. So LinkedIn can be a very effective means of finding who works at a given company and seeing how you're connected to them, right? It's a social graph. That is the other, I was being facetious. They obviously have built some useful things. And I think being able to find how you're connected to a given organization is very, very powerful and something LinkedIn is really good at. What I don't advise is if you're reaching out to engineers using LinkedIn messaging, because they just don't hang out on LinkedIn. So I guess my workflow, let's say I wanted to apply to Lyft. What would I do? I would probably first go on LinkedIn and on Facebook and on Twitter and try to see which people I'm connected to that work there. And maybe I'm lucky, maybe if I'm in a boot camp there or graduated from one, there's an alumni network and somebody from Lyft is part of that. But first thing is, do I know anybody who works there? First thing. Probably I won't, because if I did, I probably would have done that already. So the next thing I would say is look at people that are in senior roles there, and then see if their personal websites have something that they work on. So maybe it's a blog, maybe it's a project, just something that will help you start a conversation. You can also go on Hacker News and see if they have submissions there potentially. It's going to take work, but all of this work is going to be much higher return than just mindlessly sending out applications. And then once you have a few, maybe make a spreadsheet of these are my top few targets at Lyft. So maybe I'm connected 1 degree away to a director there, so maybe I can ask for an intro. Maybe an eng manager there wrote a cool blog about using, I don't know what Lyft uses in production, but maybe they wrote something about Go, I don't know, and I'm interested in Go and I have something to say about it. Great. Maybe I saw somebody tweet something interesting, or maybe I just, I'm really excited about Lyft as a company. I couldn't find anything, but why don't I try reaching out to some directors of engineering and just reach out cold and say, hey, it's been my dream to work at Lyft. I'm really passionate about ride sharing, and I would love your advice. I know that there are a ton of bootcamp people, but how can I break in? And what things do I need to do so eventually I can get my foot in the door?
Yeah. Also, I'd like to add that you can also go on all your social media channels and ask people if they know anybody at whatever company you're interested in. And then you can start that way and ask them if they can send an intro email.
It sucks that you have to do all of this though. It's not, it's one of the things we're working on at Interviewing.io, and this is less for junior folks because we just don't have that many junior roles on there right now. But when you do well in practice on Interviewing.io, you just have a list of companies and you can just click a button and schedule a technical interview at that company in 2 clicks, and you just have one. That's how I think hiring should be. And it really pisses me off that I have to give you guys this kind of advice because I don't like it any more than you do. I hope it's temporary, and I hope in 5 years, if you're good, you'll just be able to click a button and just talk to anybody you want.
Yep. Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next question.
Yeah. I would like to hear your best description of how to answer the question, tell me about yourself. Jesus, and that question still makes me sweat. I think that the best thing you can do is you probably want to give people some context about who you are, and that story won't change very much. So, probably a lot like the intros that we all did here today, but then you probably want to add something about why, what you've done in the past. The idea, this is the platonic ideal of the answer to this question, and it's really hard to do, but let's say you could craft a story where every disparate thing you've done in your career up until now is just waiting for this next step. So this role is the logical conclusion of everything you've done to date. So, for instance, maybe you studied Italian in college, right? And now you want to go work at Duolingo. I don't know if you do, right? But, something like that. Something that makes you seem genuine about your interest in the company, and also something that gives you an edge over all the other people that are applying to the role. But, I think the best thing you can do is just be real. And if you're applying to something you're not that interested in, which is okay, because your first job is probably not going to be the thing you're most passionate about, just do some homework ahead of time and find something about it that you can get excited about, and then talk about you and why you're excited about that thing.
Yeah, companies love when you're excited when they talk to you.
Totally. They really do, because it's so rare. You'd think it wouldn't be rare, but it's very, even when we're looking at applicants we're not hiring engineers right now, but when we have in the past, we get so many applications from people that just feel so generic. And it's it's not that hard. Just say something about how you care about fixing hiring. And then we'll like you more. It's not that hard. Let's see, next question. How difficult was your decision to move from a dev engineer to starting your own startup? How did you know it was time? I didn't really have a plan. Like I went from being an engineer to a recruiter in part because I didn't really want to be an engineer for the rest of my life. It was fine, but I'm not that passionate about writing code. And it feels good to admit that because there was a time when I couldn't have. But I did recruiting because I thought I was uniquely positioned to make a difference in that space because I was one of very few people who was an engineer and then actually wanted to do recruiting. Most recruiters don't have an engineering background. But I also found a problem that kept me up at night and made me angry. The reason I started interviewing IO is because I was already doing a lot of the stuff that interviewing IO does back when I was a recruiter. So I was conducting practice interviews for all my candidates, and I was trying to get them into companies in much the same way that we do now. And I just realized that it was a lot less efficient to sort of have this consulting business and do all this stuff by hand than it would be if we built a product to do some of these same things. And it was this natural progression. I didn't set out thinking I'm going to be a startup founder. I just was trying to solve things that pissed me off and where I thought I had a good chance of being successful at solving them. And this just seemed like the logical next step. And then, of course, I don't know if this is true for some portion of you, but I generally have problems with authority and always kind of knew I didn't want to have a boss. So my recruiting business, even before I started interviewing IO, was my first time when I was working for myself, other than some stuff I did in college, and it felt great. I got a taste of it. And, now I've been on my own for like 8 years, maybe 7 years. And I don't think I want to go back.
How did you make the transition from dev to recruiter? Like, how did that happen?
Yeah. I have this very intense bias toward action. So I don't really like reading or thinking. I just like doing stuff and doing it wrong and then doing it better maybe sometimes. So as with many things, I had some friends. I was fortunate who had startups, and I was asking. I'm like, hey, can I try hiring for you guys? And we'll see what happens. And they're like, okay. So I just tried doing that. And then I made some placements and I was like, okay, cool. I guess I can do this. And I just started. I don't know. I think the best way to do something is to just think of the easiest way you can get started and just do it. And it doesn't matter if you do it well. You just do it. And then the minute you do it, you're going to get feedback on it from the world. And then maybe you're going to be really bad at it, which is okay. And then you'll do something else. Or maybe you're going to do something's wrong, but something's right. And then next time you can do more things right than the first time. Okay.
I was just gonna, yeah. I was going to agree with you and just say, yeah, I'm a huge fan of, because I always talk things up so much in my head, and I realize, no, I just need to do things. So I love that attitude of just being okay, seeing how it goes, and then trying to improve from there.
Actually, if I can go on a 2-minute rant that might be useful because it's specific. I don't know. I recently had an idea for a t-shirt. It's not even that good. It was just a funny idea. And I wanted to print a t-shirt. And then I asked a few friends if they thought it was funny. And they're like, yeah, that's kind of funny. I guess I'd buy that shirt. So I'm like, great. I'm going to start a t-shirt business, and then, we can donate all the proceeds to charity or something, or do something to get publicity for helping people code. And I never sold t-shirts online before. So I Googled how do you sell t-shirts online? And just reading the stuff that I read there made me want to not sell t-shirts ever. Because there were all these sites that were like, well, first you need a business plan, and then you need to figure out your margins, and what? And I think people just get caught in these in sort of this activation energy, and it's really scary. I don't know what t-shirt margins are like. Right? I don't know what business plan. I started 2 companies, and I still shudder when I see business plan. It still fills me with cold sweat. then I'm like, oh wait, I can just go on a site and like make a design, and then there's a button somewhere where I can just say, okay, sell this design, which is much easier than doing all those other things. And then if you end up making money on that design, then you can, promote it, or you can like change the design if you don't. And that's, I think a lot of people get stuck on these things of like, how do I start a business? Well, I don't know, like, where do I get the folder that I put my business plan in? And like, I don't know if I have the right pen, and how do I incorporate this company? Like, and what's an LLC? And none of that stuff matters. Like, you can figure that out, or like pay somebody some amount of money to do that later. You just do the thing, like do the thing that you're excited about, and it'll work out, or it won't. And if it doesn't, you'll figure out something else.
Yeah, that even applies to just like cold emailing people. Just try and see what works for you.
Exactly. Yeah, it doesn't have to be perfect. Like just do something. It'll be okay. Just don't be a huge jerk. And that's fine.
Yeah. Even getting started with like 100 days of code, that's what I recommend to everybody. And like, people hesitate in getting started because they don't know what to do. Just start doing stuff, and
and you'll fuck it up, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't need to be perfect. Your journey doesn't need to be like totally planned out. Just start building anything. You don't have to. People think about it too much before they like post stuff on social media about what they're coding and what they're struggling with. Just post it.
Just do it.
Just do it.
Yeah.
That kind of is a great segue into the next question I see on our Slido.
Can you give examples of how to ask someone to a coffee chat informational interview in the least awkward way? So I think you just have to like get comfortable with the fact that it's going to be awkward, especially if you're introverted. I hate I am generally a very awkward person, if you can tell. And I hate small talk, and I hate all of this stuff. That's why, like, I started a company to make interviewing anonymous, so we wouldn't have to have small talk at the beginning of the interview, because I was so terrified, being on the giving or receiving end of like that first few minutes. So I think like whether, it's about asking them, or even when you meet with somebody for coffee in this COVID world, or on Zoom, whatever, just accept the fact that it will be awkward, but it doesn't matter. Like, once you have 3 or 4 awkward coffee chats, you're not going to feel it. It's just part of life. Some of them won't be. Some of them might be really nice, and you'll make lifelong friends, but some of them are going to feel stilted, and then you just have another one. But in terms of how to ask somebody to do it, this is a pet peeve of mine. I don't know if it applies to everybody, but I hate when people ask me to have coffee or to network, right, without some kind of clear call to action. So maybe this will help y'all write better cold emails to people. Have a specific thing that you're saying. Don't just be like, can I pick your brain? Well, no, I'm busy. Like, and everybody's busy. And I also don't know who you are. So I don't even know if giving you advice is a good use of my time, right? Because I have a lot of other stuff I could be doing. So I think the best thing is to like zero in on something specific that you can ask that person that is going to be interesting to both them and you. And that's why I used the example earlier of like finding a blog post somebody wrote, because you can find something in there that, if you learn to code, hopefully that's something you enjoy to do. And you can latch onto something in that post because you want to learn more about it. So just, especially with engineers, just go for something technical and specific, and it's going to start a much better conversation than something casual and generic.
Yeah, it might be also good to include like, oh, I seen your talk on YouTube or something, or find something that shows you know who they are and like why you're interested in talking to them. That might help capture their attention as well.
100%, totally agree.
I get so excited when people reach out to me because of stuff I've put out there. Like, I'm definitely going to agree to talk to people if they reference that.
For sure. Because you know how much effort you've put into the thing you wrote, right? It's so much work. It's so much work to write stuff on the internet. And yeah, like just knowing somebody's reading it, no matter, like, makes you so happy. All right, let's see. What interview prep plan website, if any, does Interviewing.io endorse? Well, we obviously endorse ourselves, but maybe this question is more about like, how do you prepare? So I guess, is it okay if I talk about what Interviewing IO does for a sec?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, cool. So Interviewing IO is a interview prep platform. If you are getting ready to do technical interviews, it's probably the best resource. I mean, I think, and of course it's my company, so of course I'll think that, but it is the best resource, hands down, for preparing. However, everything on Interviewing IO is actually an interview with another human being. Now, it's completely anonymous. Interviewer doesn't know who you are, so you can screw up all you want, and they'll never know. But if you haven't done a lot of technical interviews, then what you may want to do before you get on our platform is to prepare on your own. It's a format that takes some amount of getting used to, and we have a free tier and a paid tier. We used to be completely free before COVID, then we had to pivot and start charging people because otherwise we'd be dead. But you know, especially if you're spending money on premium interviews with Google and Facebook engineers, which is what we charge for, you probably want to like come into that already somewhat prepared. So one obvious answer is lead code. I'm sure you guys are working those problems. Another one, and I actually have a discount code for this one, which I can look up later and maybe send to Sam, is called Interview Cake. That one is really nice because they break problems down for you and they sort of hold your hand through the problem. And it's this kind of nice Socratic almost approach to problem solving.
So a huge sale going on right now too.
Oh, then it's probably better than the code I have then. So that's good to know.
Unless it gets layered, I don't know.
maybe it does. I'll look it up and I'll send it over.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, of course. So Interview Cake is probably my favorite one. But then, of course, once you've worked some problems on your own and you're familiar with the format, please get on Interviewing IO. I actually, I have an Interviewing IO discount code I'd love to share with y'all if you will allow me to do that.
Yeah, you're kind of cutting
I'll
out
do it in
again,
the chat.
Absolutely.
So we have free interviews where you can interview with a peer. Oh, okay. So we have free interviews where you can interview with a peer. Or we have interviews with like senior engineers from Google, Facebook, Dropbox, Amazon, Microsoft. And those cost money. They're about $100 an interview. But if you use the code that I just put into the chat, you get $20 off your first one. And that's good from today till Monday at noon. Cool. Hopefully you guys can see that.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome, of course. Let's see, back to I'm trying to think if I see people sharing some other resources in the chat as well. So there are probably a lot of others, but those are my lead code and Interview Cake are my two favorites for doing prep asynchronously. And then once you're ready to have another person breathing down your neck and have that very, very realistic experience where you get feedback, try us out. I think we're well worth the money. And of course, if you're not happy, we'll refund it. Okay, next question. What if you have no idea how to solve the problem they present you in a technical interview beyond speaking theoretically? Can you ask for a different question? No. I wish you could. No. The best thing you can do in that situation, well, obviously, best thing you can do is prepare because technical interview questions generally fall into maybe one of 5 categories, maybe even fewer. There's like, hash table problems, tree problems, dynamic programming problems, recursion problems. Maybe I'm leaving out one type, but that like covers a lot of, and once you've done a good amount of practice, you'll start to see those patterns and then you'll be over this hump, hopefully. But of course, there may very well come a time when you're not sure what to do. The best thing you can do in that situation is to start talking, even theoretically, like, hey, I'm not sure how to do this, but I think this is a hash table problem, or I think that you'd need to like iterate over every element in this array and check this thing, right? And just the act of starting to talk about it will probably spur your interviewer to give you some hints. And then, is it great if they keep giving you hints? No, but it's certainly better than just shutting down. So just try to look at it, and it's really, really hard. Like the best way to do this is just to drill yourself for months, which is also dumb. Like I hate the technical interviews are like this, and I know how scary they are, and I failed a lot of them myself. But once you drill, you'll be in a better place. But even if you don't, just like looking at it as a collaborative exercise between you and another smart person who's there to support you, even if some interviewers are bad, but a lot of them are really just like there to help you. And, maybe asking for a hint, maybe saying, I think it's like this, I think it's like that. Just having that convo will hopefully get you over the hump and get you started. And then once you start writing code, it'll feel better.
Yeah, you can also just ask questions too. The worst thing to do is just stay quiet.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And just like stare at it. You got to keep talking so that the interviewer knows what you're thinking.
Yep.
Yeah, I've been there before.
We all have.
But yeah, exactly what you said. Once you start talking a little bit, if I'm going down the wrong path, interviewers have said like, well, let's go back to the other thing that we were talking about before.
Well, are you sure you want to do that one thing?
A long time ago, I interviewed at Uber. I totally bombed that interview. And I just turned it into like a learning experience. I decided there's no way I'm going to pass this interview. So I just treated it like a class. Like one of the algos data structures questions was about using like a try. I never used a try data structure before. I didn't even know what it was before that. Even though I have a computer science degree, I never even learned what a try was in my program. And I just had the interviewer teach me how to use a try. I turned it into a free class.
If at first you don't succeed, just try again. Sorry.
Actually, regarding that, I actually failed my first Lyft interview. I interviewed at Lyft twice and a year apart, and I got through the second time. But so the first time was kind of like practice.
Yeah, I remember when I was interviewing somebody years ago, he clearly knew how to solve the problem, but he just wasn't familiar with big O notation, right? Because I think he was mostly self-taught. And he and I just kind of figured it out together. Like I kind of gave him the ground rules and explained like, what big O was. I'm like, well, it's just how many times you loop over a thing. Like, let's not like make it too mathy and scary. And he was actually like in the interview, he kind of just like figured it out and was it without using all the right terms, but he was able to get to the right answer. And so some interviewers are better than others. Some are more patient than others, but they're generally there to help you and they want to see you succeed.
Yeah, I talked to a Square engineer once and he told me a story about the smartest dumb engineer that they ever hired. They had like no idea about any of the questions they were asking in the interview, but he would just ask like the interviewer to teach them what do they mean like by this. And then they said he learned so quickly, like they like taught him like how to do what they're asking. And then he just applied it and like showed that he like demonstrated that he learned what they just taught him how to do. And they said that was like a really good hire. It ended up being.
That's like the best indicator of what a person's going to do on the job, right?
I love, totally. 100%. And it's cool that the interviewer was willing to. That's how I wish all interviews were. Oh, one other thing I was going to share. Oh, somebody shared Bradfield. Bradfield is Sam. Brett, awesome. Big fan. Another thing you guys can look at too is I just linked in the chat to Interviewing IO's YouTube channel. And there we have a public showcase of real practice interviews that have happened on our platform, of course, published with the consent of both participants. So if you haven't seen a lot of these interviews, it's a good place to get an idea for what they're going to be like. It's kind of like a boring Twitch where like all it is people interviewing each other, but it's probably like the best way to, without actually having to fail an interview yourself when you haven't done one before, because you probably will fail your first one. It's the best way to see what to expect. Going back to the thingy, one moment. Okay, there are the questions, great. What are some benefits of anonymous mock interviews that you don't see in regular ones? Well, so this is compared to regular mock interviews. I guess one benefit is that if you screw up, the interviewer doesn't know who you are. And if you ultimately do well and you hit it off with the interviewer, you can always connect with them after the interview. Another benefit, I guess, of like using our platform instead of asking your friends or maybe using another one is that scheduling is automated. So you don't have to like have a back and forth over email with somebody, or you just like you click a time slot and you have an interview, and it all just kind of works. And then you just show up and your interviewer is there. So we've tried to make it really painless because interviews are so hard, and getting yourself to even be willing to practice is so hard. We've tried to like reduce all of that friction and just make it about connecting with another person. And I guess like another advantage is just the quality of interviewers. Most of our people, if you're paying for the interview, have done hundreds and hundreds, have been at, FANG companies for years, and really like doing this. They're choosing to spend their weekends and nights and days helping people get better. So I guess those are the advantages. I guess if you apply to companies through us, those interviews are also anonymous. And an advantage of that is that if you screw up, the company doesn't know. So that's also nice. Let's see. What do you recommend is a reasonable split between skill development, side projects, and targeted job searching? Both could be full-time jobs. Okay, I would love to hear what other people think about this, because my view is very extreme and I'm not that confident in it. But I think that as a junior, so I guess let me be very, very explicit about the assumptions I'm making. If you want to find a job, side projects probably won't help you. If you want to become a better engineer, side projects will help you. And it's kind of unfortunate that there is that dichotomy, because in theory, if you were a better engineer, it should just be easier to find a job. And I keep harping on this because I'm so pissed off about how job searching is. But in today's world, the harsh reality is, recruiters will tell you like, oh, do a side project, and your boot camps probably tell you to do side projects and to fill your resume. Nobody looks at them. Nobody is looking. And it really sucks, because you've poured your heart and soul into these things. But one, if it's a side project that you did while at a boot camp, chances are every other grad from that cohort, or maybe you do a few projects, right? So, but like a third of the grads from that cohort have exactly the same project on their resume. It's also true of computer science grads. If you go to a career fair as a company and people are submitting their resumes to you, you start looking at them and they all sort of bleed together, because they all have, like when I, in my undergrad, in our software engineering lab, we had to work on this project called anti-chess. So the idea is like, it's like a chess game and you have to do the same kind of depth first search, but the difference is you're trying to lose the game rather than win it. So half the people in our class did anti-chess, and then the other half of the people in our class did this pinball game where like you were given a graphics engine and you had to do. So anyway, when people look at those resumes, they basically see anti-chess and pinball and anti-chess and pinball and anti-chess and pinball. So putting those projects is not that useful, even though they were probably useful for you to learn stuff. And then if after you graduate, you're spending a lot of time building side projects, it's probably not the best use of your time, unless you have the luxury of that time and you want to learn and get better and are really passionate and aren't about the job search. The one notable exception to this is probably, let's say the company you want to work at has some public API that's like really neat, and you build something cool with that public API. Then you'll probably get the company's attention. And then, of course, the other notable exception is, every year somebody gets on the front page of Hacker News because they built some really cool visual resume. Like one guy built something that looked like a Mario game, but it was also his resume. That was a few years ago. But those are few and far in between. The reality is, if you're all about a job search, you should just be heads down, sales funnel, email all the engineers. So spend your time between hustling like that and doing interview prep, because interview prep matters less until you get interviews. But somehow the way the world always works is you get your first interview after months of crickets, and then all of a sudden you have 50 others. and it's the same with dating, right? So you never know when that is going to happen. So you don't want to squander that opportunity, because if you screw up an interview at a company, unless you go through us and it's anonymous, the company is going to know, and then you can't apply for another 6 months to a year. There's a cooling period. So you've got to do both of these in parallel. And side projects, as much as I believe in them as a way to make you a better engineer, I do not think they will get the attention that you think they will.
Yeah.
Sorry, very long answer.
We get this question almost every week, and I think our guests usually always have a different answer, because it's so hard to answer this question. Even me, I probably don't agree with everything Aline said, just because I have a very unorthodox way of how I got all my jobs. I never applied for any of my software engineering jobs. I just have like a low time preference, and I'm lucky I have friends that will let me sleep on their couch if I don't have income, and I have a family I can go like live with them for free if I need to, so I can extend my runway really long. So I rather focus on building my skills and just meeting people, and then eventually a job just comes along, like somebody's like,
Yeah.
hey, you want to do this job? That's what happened to me every time. So it depends who you talk to. You kind of just gotta see what works for you. Just take everybody's advice with a grain of salt, and like,
Huge grain of salt.
yeah, just try it out and see what works for you, because different things just work for different people. So just want to add that, just if people are getting confused, because everybody keeps giving like different answers on this question. This is probably the question that's asked the most since we started doing this meetup.
No, I think that's a good point. I guess like one thing I'll add to, more in line with what Sam just said, is, you know, if you build a brand, everything gets a lot easier. All of a sudden, people are coming to you. So if you are strategic about this, or if you're just, most likely you're not going to be strategic, you're just going to be passionate about sharing something with the world, and then you'll be lucky enough that the world wants the thing that you want to share, which sadly doesn't always happen. But once you have a brand, like none of these rules really apply to you, because people will just take you seriously because they'll know that you're worth talking to.
Yep.
Until that happens, you probably have to dig through some shit.
Yeah. For me, I did a lot of hackathons, and I won some hackathons, or at least came like third or second place or whatever. So then, and I like always sharing it on social media, so people knew. So that's why they referred me, even though they never like did a project with me. They're like, oh, Sam can do it. He like won these hackathons, and they would just refer me to like the job. So, I mean, it took a long time though. I didn't make a lot of money. Like when I graduated from the boot camp, I had like very little income for like probably my first year or two. I didn't start earning a normal market rate salary.
Can you share how
till
much it was?
First 4 months, I tried to start a startup, zero income, free lunch, free dinner, free place to stay. My friend let me stay on his couch, and we hacked on the project at his house. It was a nice house. He had a hot tub and everything. So zero income, but I didn't have to worry about I didn't have to worry about living expenses. Second job I got, contracting, $25 an hour, no benefits, nothing. Was enough to pay rent and eat. My first full-time job, I got paid $4,000 a month, but I got 3% equity in the company, which I still have. Hopefully they make it one day. Same company, as soon as they got funding, they bumped my salary to $108,000. So I was finally making like a market rate salary for a Bay Area like dev with like a couple years experience. And then now at Lyft, I'll skip some of the steps, but I did keep going. I tried to make my salary go up every year, whether it's asking for raises at the company or moving if I had to. And now at Lyft, my total compensation is $280,000.
Dun dun dun.
Nice. Well
so
done.
I went from 0 to 280 in 7 years. Well, my total compensation has gone down now because COVID has like dumped all the companies' stock prices. But when I was hired, the amount was, if you break down the calculation, and you can, it's all public too. You can go on levels.fyi. It's actually the amount on levels FYI now for my position at Lyft is like 295,000 or something like that. So I probably should have negotiated higher, but I think it's gone up since I think it used to be around 280 when I got hired. So I got hired about like what the average person was getting in my position at Lyft. But yeah. But you can always check. The bigger companies are all on levels.fyi.
It's a windy path.
Totally.
What is that?
Windy path. Yeah.
But in the beginning, I didn't care about it. I just wanted to hack on stuff. That's why somebody was like, I'll give you 25 bucks an hour. And I was like, okay. I didn't negotiate or anything. I didn't even apply for the job. I just talked to somebody at a meetup and they're like, I don't want to do this anymore. It doesn't pay that much. Do you want to do it? And I was like, okay. And then
That's
he just told the people, Sam's gonna take over for me. And I just showed up at stand up and they gave me the tax papers and I just started working there. I didn't even interview or anything. I just showed up to stand up. They're just like, Travis said you're gonna take over for him. Because to them it's only 25 bucks an hour. You know, they're like, if I suck, then they'll just stop paying me. It's just 1099 contract work, so it wasn't a big risk for them, I think, to like.
Yeah, contract hiring is different.
It probably cost them more money to like hire a recruiter to find like somebody who's really gonna help. Like they were still trying to build like a proof of concept, you know. They were like a small startup, just trying to like iterate on their idea. So, and I got it because I used to go to Code for America Hack Night every week, and that's where I randomly was talking to somebody. He went to Dev Bootcamp too, and yeah, he had found it, and then he didn't want to do it anymore, so he passed it on to me.
I love that story so much.
Me too.
I only ended up doing that job for like 4 or 5 months, I think. But that was my entry into front end development. Before that, I was doing mostly Ruby on Rails backend. And then that company was another Ruby on Rails shop, but they had a senior engineer who was doing all the Rails backend. So they needed somebody to do the front end. So that's what they hired me to help with. And I didn't know what I was doing in the beginning. It was Backbone.js, which I had no idea how to do anything. I kind of just like fumbled through it and just asked a lot of questions on the internet to like other people, and it worked out.
Yeah, I was also just gonna mention, going back to the question, sorry, what was the breakdown that everyone recommended? I totally just dropped my own video in the chat in case anyone wants to hear what my answer was. But yeah, it's so funny to hear so many different perspectives. I know that, for example, whenever I've been interviewing people at the company that I work at, and we'll always make a point to ask, like, hey, do you have any passion projects you're working on right now? Like not the projects that you did during your boot camp, but stuff that you have taken an interest in on your own time now. It counts against people if they say no, which is tough because, like, yeah, job searching is such a full-time job, but we want to be able, especially for juniors, we need people who are obviously very passionate and willing to put in time and learn and just really be tenacious and work through problems on their own without somebody saying, this is what you have to do.
Yeah,
so,
and if you're constantly posting on social media about what you're working on, what you're struggling, people can kind of they kind of sense like how hungry you are, and I think that like shows a lot to people.
Yeah, but shoot, and I can't remember, there were a couple of things that you had said that I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. And I'm gonna go back and watch this video and make a point to call that out.
Yeah, I guess like I think we all kind of agree. I mean, I think side projects, unless you are a real hustler with it, probably will not get you in the door. They might raise your odds, assuming you get in the door and assuming you do not bomb your technical interviews. Side projects will distinguish you from candidates that don't care about coding.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the thing was that I was totally agreeing with in my head, finding their API, finding open source projects that they have, that all, I think it has to.
Yeah, that's the take. Like that's the, if you apply to companies that have like cool public APIs, that's like such a loophole. And hopefully it also gives you some idea of what you'd actually be doing. And you can figure out if you want to do that.
Totally.
And also about side projects, if you do work on side projects, you have to ship them, put them up on the internet, link them, make sure you include the link on the GitHub, post them on social media everywhere. Otherwise, people don't know about it. They're not gonna go like dig and like clone your repo, and, like start it up. No way, nobody's gonna do that. You have to make it easy so they can just like click the button and be like, oh, cool. Yeah.
Totally. Completely agree with all of that. Okay, I guess what's the next question? It seems like, oh, this is a good one. It seems like interviewing IO is geared toward middle-level developers who can afford $100 an interview. How can we leverage your side best as junior developers? Fair. We can't pay, we've been working so hard to lower our prices, and the reason it's that is because we have to pay our interviewers, and these are people whose time is worth a lot of money. But there's some good news. Well, one, there's the code that I posted in the chat. It's 20, all caps, June 20. So that'll at least take $20 off. I know that's not, super, super meaningful, but it's something. We also have a discount where if you buy 4 interviews, you get 20% off on top of the code. But let me answer your question better. One of the things that we're working on right now is deferred payments. So the idea is don't practice now and don't pay us anything until you find a job. It's not like an ISA. It's not a portion of your income. You're just going to be paying for the interviews you did. Maybe they'll be marked up a little bit. They probably will be because we're assuming some amount of risk. But that's probably coming really soon. We're not that far from shipping it. So if that's something you'd be interested in, just sign up and get on the site there. And then we'll send out a notification to everybody once deferred payments are out. And they're like, you owe us nothing until you find a job. Then of course maybe I'll like skip to this question and then come back to the one about cover letters. What's the difference between peer interviews and pro interviews at Interviewing IO? Peer interviews are literally with peers. So they are with other people on the site who may or may not be experienced engineers. We do try to match people up based on skill level, but it is a bit of a crapshoot. Peer interviews are only going to be with people who are actually willing to conduct an interview, which means they have a question prepared. But it's not the same as interviewing with a pro. A pro is an interviewer with at least 4 or 5 years of experience working at a top company, and somebody who's done at least dozens of interviews professionally. In many cases, people have done over 500. And they are there to help you learn. They're there to give you actionable feedback. And this is like their side job for them. So it's something they take very, very seriously. Peer interviewers can also be really, really good, but it's not as reliable, frankly. Okay. Any tips on cover letter? What do people look for when they read the applicant's cover letter? Oh, well, we don't really read cover letters that much. It's something that's worth doing if you can do it quickly, because it's not going to hurt you and it might help you, but it's not something I would stress too much over. I guess like one thing that I don't like seeing in cover letters when I do read them and when I used to read them as a recruiter, was this like 5-paragraph thing, just restating your resume. The best thing you can do in a cover letter is keep it short. Maybe keep it to the length of 2 tweets and just say, I am excited about your company. Here is why, and here is why I am uniquely positioned to do well there, and sort of closing that loop. You can probably do that in 5 sentences. And of course, it's more work for you. Just personalize, your cover letter for every company that you apply to. But especially like one place where cover letters might actually make a difference is AngelList, if you guys still use that, because the companies don't see that much, and they do see what you write. So don't just restate. I know it feels like really bad to just have to come up with something personal for each company, but make it short and just talk about the thing that they do. And if you can connect the dots and say, this is why I am a good fit for you, then you should do that as well. But like, also, if you can't do it, don't stress over it too much, because honestly, this is one of those like incremental things. It's not going to be something that makes or breaks you.
Yeah, I think it's probably different in every company, but again, for like junior level stuff, my team was always impressed when people would spend the time to put together something. But yeah, you can't spend a ton of time on it. And yeah, the five paragraphs would be way too much.
Okay, next question. How long are interviewing IO interviews? Is it 1 hour? What is time split between coding and feedback? They're about an hour. It's mostly coding. Feedback, sometimes interviewers give you in the last 10 minutes. Sometimes they just write, they always write it, especially if you're paying for it, they will write you up very detailed feedback and rate you on a bunch of different dimensions. But it's about an hour, which should be indicative of what a real interview is like. I think real interviews are about 45 minutes to an hour, depending on how many follow-up questions you have. So it should feel pretty realistic. Okay, next question. If we wanted to use a pro interviewing IO interview to practice, and we aren't applying to a FANG company, but still want to practice, what FANG interviewer do you recommend? So we have this one pool just called professional interviewer from top company. They're not going to be necessarily, they will either be from FANG or from LinkedIn or Dropbox or Slack or Stripe. So, companies like that. And the $100 tier is like, we'll just kind of pick for you. So if you're not looking for FANG, but you just want to get a very indicative technical interview experience, that's the one that I would use. Honestly, I mean, you can also choose a specific company. So like if you are applying at a Google, you can say, I want a Google interviewer. It's a lot more expensive. And honestly, like, I'm not sure that it's that much more valuable, because technical interviews at Google are not that different than technical interviews at Facebook, especially at a junior level, or technical interviews at Microsoft or Amazon. Or, I mean, Amazon has like a little bit of like leadership stuff, but it's really not that different. At the end of the day, you have to have computer science fundamentals and solve algorithmic questions. So just as long as your interviewer is good and they're willing to like teach you stuff like we talked about earlier and walk you through things, which all of our interviewers will, there's no reason to like worry about a specific company. Just take the cheapest option. Okay, getting down there. Would you emphasize breadth of technical skills or depth? For example, should I learn a new skill like Python as a front-end dev or strengthen my JavaScript? Would love to hear what others have to say about this. I strongly think you should strengthen your JavaScript, and not just like, knowing idiomatic JavaScript, but just like knowing how to answer interview questions in JavaScript. So, things like, do you understand scoping? Do you understand, aggregator function? I mean, there's a ton. Like, if it's a true front end role, they're probably going to be asking you if you understand, like, the DOM and routing and all sorts of other things. So I don't think learning a new language is nearly as useful as going deep on the thing that you're supposed to know. But I would love to hear others' take on this too.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I know this is another thing that we've talked about before and people have different opinions on. But I really wish that when I had been starting up, I would have run with what I knew. I kind of tried to balance front end, back end for a really long time. And now I feel like I'm finally really digging into front end. I think I could have it's kind of this idea of branding yourself. I feel like if you end up looking into that at all, a lot of people will say like, know your audience. And in my opinion, it's like, well, I'm going to have to cut out some of my audience, but if I can direct my content to a really specific type of person, then that person is going to connect with it really well. I think of it kind of in a similar way with, yeah, I'm going to eliminate any sort of full stack or back end positions, but I at least will be a really good candidate or a much better candidate if I really focus in on in this example, JavaScript. But another perspective, go ahead, Sam.
I usually agree too that you should focus. When you get on the job, you might have to like learn more stuff, especially if it's a smaller company, but you can just learn that on the job. I don't think it will affect you that much in the hiring process. But generally, I just tell people to do what makes them happy, because that's where you're gonna learn the fastest. If you like learning a bunch of different things like Python and JavaScript, and that makes you happy, then go for it. But if you just like JavaScript, I wouldn't learn Python just because you think that might help you get the job.
Yeah, I can't agree with that more. Like, just do stuff that makes you happy if you can. I mean, if you hate coding, then it probably sucks that you're in this position. But if you like it, then it's easier to do what you love than to game the system, because eventually doing, in my naive worldview, and I've been lucky, doing what you love will like reap more rewards than trying to hack it.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna give some resources if you are more into front end dev and JavaScript to help you prepare for the interviews. I would definitely recommend reading Effective JavaScript and watching JavaScript the Hard Parts on Front End Masters. I can dig up the links while Rob Brady jumps in.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to say that, like, who knows what you're feeling at this point. I know when I had graduated, I was burnt out and had imposter syndrome. And so I was not eager to be practicing code, unfortunately. And I think if I had been able to dive in and just focus on one thing, like once you see some progress, once you see that you've made some cool stuff, that helps you get motivated and realize like, oh yeah, I just remember this point in the whole process where I was like, I better really love my job because this is not fun right now. And so yeah, kind of along those lines of do whatever is going to help you realize that this is fun. You spent probably a lot of money for a reason to go into this, and bring some fun into it in whatever way you can.
Totally agree. But it is scary and overwhelming, and it's not always gonna. I don't end like you guys are in a hard, like it's hard, like when it's your first job, and it gets so much easier. But just keep doing what you're doing, and eventually it'll get better. Let's see. Are we out of time, or should I keep going?
That's up to you. If you need to dip out,
I don't have a hard stop. I just don't want to bore anybody.
We usually just keep going until everybody leaves.
Okay, great. Then I can keep going. All right. Aline, why did you initially choose to go into cooking professionally after graduating from MIT instead of getting a job in tech? So this is actually piggybacks well off of what we just talked about, which is doing what makes you happy. I did it because I didn't want to write code, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I was so burnt out after graduating college. I knew I didn't want to be a doctor or a lawyer or a management consultant or a software engineer, or be a professor, which is kind of everything that my friends were doing. And I had started watching Food Network, and I just thought it would be fun. So I did it for 3 years before I went back to being an engineer, because I frankly ran out of money and wasn't a very good professional cook. But doing that actually taught me so much about hiring in a way that I didn't realize until I connected the dots years later, because hiring in kitchens is so meritocratic. You just show up and then they watch you chop an onion, and then they show you how to put up some dishes, and then you just do that for the rest of the night. And if you did a good job at the end of it, they give you an offer. And if not, then they send you home. And I just thought that was so cool. And it's really, really stuck with me. And it also made me a lot tougher, I think, than I was before, because working in a kitchen is really fucking hard. So yeah, I'm really glad I did it, and it made me really happy for a time. And that's it. It was cool. It was cool to do something weird. Let's see. Next question. How much does having gaps in your resume matter? How bad does it look? Should I do full-time job hunting or take on a shitty offer while part-time job hunting? I think that if you're a junior dev, like anything, like probably looks like you already are kind of in a not well, you don't have a lot of leverage, right? You're not in a great position as it is. So I wouldn't necessarily make it harder on yourself. I think also that you're probably, I don't know how long you've been without a job and how much it's making you panic. But if you have the financial means, if you have a friend's couch to crash on, if maybe you have some consulting work, if money, of course, if you're in a financial crisis, you should take a shitty offer. But if you're not, what feels like an eternity to you probably isn't that long. I think it's well understood and kind of expected. And I think it's also fucked up that this is well understood and expected, but it's kind of understood that if you graduate a boot camp, you might be out of work for 6 months. And that feels really bad. And it feels like a long time. And it feels like you're an abject failure. And you're probably, like Beatty said, you're probably suffering from imposter syndrome. But in the grand scheme of things, it's not that long. And a lot of people are going through exactly the same thing. So I don't think it looks any worse than being a junior dev who graduated from a boot camp. And there's nothing wrong with that. But like, it's just not like, it's not the first thing recruiters look for. And I don't think it matters. Would love to hear what Beatty and Sam have to say about it, though, because we might disagree.
Oh, gosh. I guess it totally depends on the situation, on the job, and on the on your situation, because I think eventually, yeah, I went into everything saying I'm going to hold out for like the perfect or a really good job. And then a couple weeks went by and I was like, I cannot motivate myself to do anything. And there was this opportunity to do some work on a startup and they weren't going to pay us, but I recognized it was going to be something that to put on my resume. And I feel like because my self-worth was so low regarding my skills, I took it and I felt better going to future interviews being like, look, I have this experience. That's what worked for me. I don't know if it's the right thing to do or not. Yeah, I mean, me looking back at myself, I wish I could have just knuckled down and done that same work and been able to dig into things that I really wanted to dig in on. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I asked this because like I'm getting desperate, like week 5 into job hunting and getting like offers that's like, I'm like, minimum wage, bro? Like, this is not why I learned how to code. Or like free, like volunteer, hey, I have an opportunity for you. But then at the same time, it feels like a good experience, but maybe not.
What coding job, I'm sorry, you don't have to say their name, I guess unless you want to, but what company is offering coding jobs for minimum wage?
It's like a contract job, and it
For
was,
like $15 an hour?
I think, yeah, it's might be even, like my friend told me it's even less. They're like abusing bootcamp grads.
No. Yeah, I mean, I would not take that, not because...
And there's another one. There was another one like that.
So I would run for the hills from those because, and I'll tell you why. It's not even about the money. It's about the fact that your first few jobs, and especially your first job, is going to be where you learn a lot of your habits. And bad habits are going to be really hard to break. And I have a hard time believing that a company that pays so little is going to attract top talent that's going to mentor you well. So, you know, if you need the money, there's no shame in taking a job for the money. But even then, you can probably, like, if you're looking at contract gigs, you can probably find something better than that. And, you know, week 5, like, probably sounds like an eternity to you, but in the grand scheme, like, again, I hate that this is true. And I wish I have a lot of anger at the bootcamp industry, because I think that they don't do a good job of managing expectations or preparing their grads for the real world. But 5 weeks is not that bad. 6 months after that, you still haven't found something, but it's going to take months just to like get good at interviewing.
Okay.
It took me 11 years to get my first software engineering job.
Give me the contact for the friend's couch so that I can hit him up.
Yeah, I graduated with a computer science degree in 2002 and didn't get my first job as a software engineer till 11 years later.
What were you doing in between?
I took a long journey. I gave up looking for a job about 6 months in, I think. I was in Hawaii.
Well, also
I grew
you
up in Hawaii.
graduated like right when right after the
Yep.
the first .com bubble, which is like the worst time. Kind of like what's happening now, maybe.
And it might have been worse for like tech jobs. And I was in Hawaii. I grew up there and I was dumb. I wasn't ready to leave yet. So that was one mistake. Some of my classmates moved to like Mountain View and stuff after we graduated. But I had never lived anywhere besides Hawaii. I had a girlfriend at the time that I was dating for a long time. So I didn't leave. So yeah, I just took any job I could get. Eventually, I was still living with my parents. I was like, I gotta get out of this house. So I took a job at Kinko's, which is FedEx office now. Worst job ever. Somehow I lasted 6 months there. It was like terrible. I had nightmares still about working there. And then I got a job at a credit union. Actually, they hired me to like work on some like simple website stuff. So it wasn't really making use of my computer science degree. It's just kind of like a marketing site for like the mortgage department, just like HTML, CSS stuff. And then that's when the mortgage industry blew up. So they were like, we need you to help us with this stuff instead. Like, who cares about the website? The manager just liked me and she was like, we can just train you how to do this other stuff. And then I got stuck in that for a few years. And then the mortgage industry blew up. So I joined the Peace Corps, crossing my fingers that things would be better when I came back, and it was. And then I finally broke into the industry when I came back after I went to Dev Bootcamp.
All right.
Because that was after I graduated the bootcamp, that was like a boom. So I came in the first time during a bus, and the next time I tried to break in, it was just better timing. I like graduated the bootcamp when startups were like going to the moon. So a lot of it is just timing. Yeah.
All right. That makes me feel more relaxed. I'm just a very impatient person, but I'll chill out a little bit.
You have to try and like lower your time preferences if possible, especially because we're in this environment. Just it's really hard right now. Just if you can, just keep building your skills in your network is what I tell people, because eventually it's gonna swing back the other way. I'm like super bullish on the future of like jobs for developers. I think it's gonna skyrocket to Mars.
I mean, if anything, all of this has proved how important it is for people to have online presences and be able to communicate and do things virtually. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I agree too. It'll probably get worse. Well, I don't want to be too pessimistic, but I think it'll get worse before it gets better.
I think so too.
Maybe if you are in financial duress of any kind, maybe take like one of those things, because I think that the economy the stock market won't do what it's doing now forever. And I have a feeling that once like so right now you can't evict people and people are still spending their government checks. I think once that starts running out, we're going to be in for a world of hurt for at least a few months.
Yeah, I think so too. That's why I recommend to people to like try and extend your runway if you can by just going to move in with friends or family if you have that option. That extends your runway a lot. You don't have to pay rent. And maybe if you move in, if your parents let you move in with them or some other family member, you might also get free food. So it will extend your runway a lot, and you can just focus on like just keep learning and keep meeting people online.
Yeah, it may also be better to take free work where you're going to learn from good people rather than taking minimum wage work where you will likely not learn from good people. It's not ideal. I do not believe in free labor. I think it's fucked up.
Yeah.
But in these uncertain times, like maybe that's better than nothing.
Yeah.
And it will teach you something.
That's
They still have the Code for America meetup, and they do it virtually now. If you're looking for stuff to hack on, I think every Wednesday night. If you go on Meetup, there's just, I think Code for America San Francisco or something. I can like look for the link. I used to go to that every week, and like people just pitch projects, and then you can just pick a project to like jump on that team.
Okay, should we do the next question?
Let's do it.
Okay. What do you do when you feel like you're stuck in a rut as an engineer, finding it hard to feel motivated and passionate about your work? Well, I mean, there are like a few things that you can do. So I think like the question is then, am I stuck in a rut because I don't want to be an engineer and I just don't want to write code? Or am I stuck in a rut because I don't actually like what I'm doing right now, but I'm passionate about the industry in general? So I guess I'd try to figure out which one of those it is. I think that if you are fortunate to have a job right now, like maybe it's not the best time to leave it. Maybe the economy will be fine. I don't know. I don't think so, but I've been wrong about a lot of things. But let's say you do have the luxury of maybe leaving your job. I'd say that if it gets to the point where you dread getting out of bed in the morning and you can't get yourself to do your work, and sometimes that just happens because you're burned out. Sometimes your moods go up and down. But if it's something that's consistent for like at least a month, where every morning you're like, oh, like I can't do this, then it may be time to start looking around. Sometimes even just the act of looking around makes you feel empowered, and then that breaks you out of your rut. If nothing else, if you do have a job and you start looking around and you get other offers, you can use those other offers to raise your existing salary without ever leaving your job, which could be a good thing to do. But I wouldn't quit without having something else lined up, probably. Or, maybe you just don't like coding anymore, or maybe you're really tired, in which case maybe just taking like a week or two, like 2 weeks off of work and just doing nothing. You can't really travel now anyway, right? So just I don't know. It helps me to just sit in bed and just watch Netflix 8 hours a day when I'm burnt out. And then after a few days of that, I want to go back to work. And you just force yourself to just do nothing. And you'll be surprised how quickly you're passionate about doing something again. But it varies from person to person. I think what's critical is figuring out why you feel that way, whether it's your current circumstances or whether it's something deeper than that.
Yeah, I agree with all of that.
Yeah, but doing nothing can help you, give you space to think about what motivates you and ask those deep questions, because that is the thing that you're going to want to know. Like, I also have noticed, again, just like me knowing myself, I get really motivated when I'm helping other people. So that's always something that I toss out. Like, there's so much going on in the world right now. There's a way, like if you're worried, like, oh no, maybe I don't like to code. Maybe it is the projects you're working on. Maybe you could go try to find a project that aligns better with what you're interested in, whether that's like helping other people or who knows what it could be.
That's a really good idea.
Just try and find what makes you happy, what gives you energy.
Yeah. That's the resounding theme for today. Okay,
Because
last one.
because like
Oh,
if you don't like coding, you're not gonna last. I think you're gonna burn out at some point and just stop doing it. So you'll have to find at least something that you like in the coding world to be able to keep doing it, because you're gonna have to keep learning. Technology just keeps changing.
Yep. And maybe you won't be an engineer forever, but I mean, in my case, I kind of knew I didn't want to do it for the rest of my life, but having done it for a few years set me up so I could do what I'm doing today because, you know, even though I wasn't the technical founder of my startup, like I wrote about a third of the prototype and, you know, I know like what's really cool about having been an engineer is, you know, when people are bullshitting you about what's possible, right? And you know how long tasks should take roughly, and you know what questions to ask. And it just gives you such a leg up on people that are not technical, even if you're not doing it day to day.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who moved into like engineering manager or product manager positions, having been a software engineer first for at least a few years, helps them because of all those things that Aline just said.
Yeah, nobody can bullshit you then, and that feels really good. Okay, last one. All right. If I get a software tester position offer while I'm hunting for a software engineer position, should I take it? I don't want to be drifted away from development. As with some of these other questions, if you're in financial duress, yes, you should take the money. If you're not in financial duress, though, I would say you should not take it because one, it's not really what you want to be doing. It's such a different job, I think. And I think it requires kind of a different set of skills almost. It requires a certain amount of attention to detail, and that being a software engineer does not necessarily require. And you have to be like a certain kind of person, I think, to enjoy that work. Some people love it, some don't. And nothing, you know, I have no inherent opinion about it beyond the fact that I am not a good software tester. But I think just if I put my recruiter hat on for a moment, if I'm looking at two identical resumes, except one person is coming out of a tester role and one person is coming out of an eng role, or maybe even doesn't have the tester role, I think I would think, oh, maybe they weren't good enough to get an eng role the first time around, and then they went to this one. And I'd rather like just take a gamble on somebody that doesn't have that ding. That maybe not be rational. I don't really like that that's true, but I know that I'm not the only recruiter who thinks this way. That said, if you enjoy that work and you want there, you can build a really, really good career in software testing as well, but it is a very different thing.
Aline, but what if it's at a company that you really, really like? Do you think it's helpful to at least take that to get your foot in the door and then try and pivot
That's
into
fair.
the developer?
Yeah, that's a good point. I did not think of that example. In that case, might make sense, but it also depends on like what the odds are. Like I know at Google, for instance, like it's hard to move from one path to the other path. If it's a smaller company where there aren't all these lanes and it's very rigid, then it might be a good idea. I don't know. What is it like at Lyft?
I don't know about this specific one, but I work with another front-end engineer who reviews some of my PRs, and he didn't start as Lyft. He didn't even know front-end engineering until like a couple of years ago. He came in as a data analyst, and I don't know how he ended up changing, but I think like 2 years in, I don't know if his team just needed help with front-end, and then he just stepped up to the plate and like learned it, but like he switched into doing front end, and now he's been doing front end for like a couple of years, and he didn't have any experience doing that. I don't think he planned it. That just kind of happened. So I don't know about people. I don't know other than that at Lyft, but I know other stories like at Square, somebody I went to their boot camp with. They were working at Square before they went to their boot camp in the business side of things. And then after they graduated, they went back to their same role, but like they had a plan that they wanted to move into development, and they just built like tools, like they built some tools that help him do his work better, and he shared it with his colleagues, and then I guess that proved that he could do engineering, and eventually they moved him into engineering. So I think if you do plan to do this, maybe make it clear up front when like you're applying, like, yeah, I would like to hopefully move into software engineering at some point. Maybe you can even just ask about that, if what the possibility is.
When
I talk to recruiters, I just ask anything.
Yeah, I don't know if that might be a ding against you.
Yeah.
I think if it's clear that you just view the position as a stepping stone, it may not be. Like, it depends on how involved the person you're asking. Like, if you're asking your direct manager, they're going to be there. That'll probably turn them off. If you're asking some rando recruiter who has no say in anything about how often people move from one role to the other, then that's a little different.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a definite gray area there. My company where I started, we definitely have positions that ramp you up to become a software engineer. We have apprenticeships, internships. The position where I started was like a support role for engineers. And then we also have a QA team that is specifically looking for people who want to be and remain QA engineers. So I know if people talk to that hiring manager or a recruiter recruiting for that team, we would not consider hiring you. That doesn't mean, I do appreciate my company's willingness to change teams. So maybe after 2 years, if you've been on the team and you want to try something else, we would consider moving you. But yeah, you never know what the company is going to view that as. But you can also see, maybe you, like, if you can get enough information, maybe you're doing Selenium tests, and is it Selenium
Yep.
That's JavaScript based. And so maybe you could make sure you're keeping up building your skills with JavaScript in that sense. And then maybe in 6 months, there's a different opportunity that lines up better. Again, if you're running out of runway and you need a job, it kind of all depends on your situation. But yeah, I think each company could be pretty different in the way that they view that as getting your foot in the door.
Wait, Beatty, where do you work again? I'm sorry, I missed it because my internet was crap.
Sure. I work at, it used to just be called Trunk Club. We were a startup.
And now it's Nordstrom.
Yep.
Okay.
This
Awesome.
past week was our first
I'm a fan.
week.
Gotcha. Are we out? Or did we complete the mission?
We're out of questions.
Mark is asking
Yes.
something in the chat. He says, aren't most entry-level positions a stepping stone?
Oh, fair. Aren't most entry-level positions a stepping stone anyway? Yeah, for sure. But it's like, is it a stepping stone like in the same river kind of thing? I don't know. That's maybe mixing metaphors a little bit, but you'll still probably get where you want to be, but the path may end up being more difficult and circuitous than you expected. Yeah. So.
Okay.
Yay. We answered the question.
We actually made it through the list of questions. I didn't think we were going to make it to the end today.
I know.
So.
Yay, us.
Does anybody else want to just shout out questions if you have any other questions before we wrap it up? If not, usually at the end, whoever wants to stick around, other people can introduce themselves if they want. Also, I'll share my LinkedIn if anybody wants to connect and they're not already connected.
Yeah.
And also, we have a Slack.
I'll stop recording at this point. So in case anyone wants to introduce themselves, they can feel free.
Or ask any like controversial questions.
Yeah.